Okay, so I recently released a video talking about towing relatively light travel trailers with relatively heavy-duty pickup trucks. Specifically towing those travel trailers that are like under 5,500, 6,000 pounds with a truck like this, an F450, an F350 dually, maybe an F350 single rear-wheel truck, but in essence towing a trailer with a truck that is super overkill for that trailer. Now, there were really great comments, really great responses, but then there were some interesting comments and interesting responses, and I wanted to talk about those because I think a lot of those folks missed the video, or they skipped through half of it, or they just weren't paying attention. So let's clarify it. Hang tight, I'll be right back. So if there is any YouTuber who's been guilty of trying to talk to people out of towing with a truck that's too light, it's definitely me. I always talk about the fact that you should definitely get a truck or an SUV with more than enough tow capacity, more than enough payload capacity to tow the type of trailer that you plan on towing, regardless of what type of trailer it is. There were some comments that I felt were really relevant, and then some comments that I needed to add some clarification to, and some comments that were just super negative because some people just tend to be super negative. One of the first comments was actually a good comment. It was from a gentleman who said that he moved from a half ton to a 3/4 ton, and he went from white knuckle towing to a really nice experience, which is exactly what I talk about. If you're towing a travel trailer that is technically too heavy, or it's not the right size for the truck that you plan on towing it with, absolutely it makes sense to go to a heavier duty truck. There's a lot of folks out there with 36-foot 9,000 pound travel trailers that are going to transfer probably close to 1,200 pounds to the back of a vehicle. And that is absolutely 3/4 ton territory up, in my opinion. These are not the folks I'm talking about in this video. If you are somebody who is towing a reasonable sized travel trailer that weighs upwards of 6,000, 7,000 pounds and higher, I recommend even single rear wheel 1-ton trucks, because in many cases it's pretty much the same thing as the 3/4 ton truck. They might put a helper spring on, the spring rate might be slightly increased, the back of the truck might have a slightly higher rake to it to be able to support and level out the load whenever you're putting the weight on it. If you are towing in that territory, you likely are going to actually have closer to 1,500 to 1,600, 1,700 pounds worth of weight inside of your vehicle and hanging off the back of your vehicle when you're towing, after you've taken into account tongue weight, all the stuff you load in your vehicle, the hitch itself, and the supplies that are in the bed. Those aren't the folks I was talking about in this video. If you were towing a traditional tandem axle trailer, in most cases, a 3/4 ton truck would be ideal. A 1-ton single rear wheel truck would be ideal. What I was specifically referring to in that video is folks who tow very lightweight travel trailers with very heavy duty pickup trucks, and that lighter tongue weight doesn't put enough weight down on the back of the truck because the firmer suspension on the truck is actually transferring a lot more shock to the front section of the RV, potentially causing the front section to fatigue, fail, or crack because of the amount of shock that's being transferred to it. Again, in the back of the F450 right here, it is a very rough ride if you don't have a lot of weight in the bed of the truck. And if you hook a trailer to the back of this truck and there's nothing there to suppress that shock, I could absolutely see where it could eventually cause damage to a travel trailer. I'm just being honest with you. And again, I think the common sense approach to this is the approach that I take. Now, that some folks are going to be like, you know what, do you have any empirical evidence of this? Well, I just recently did 2 video series on shock absorbing hitches, not using one and then using one, and the differences in terms of how much shock is being transferred from the truck to the trailer and the trailer to the truck. The first round, we explored the shock in the truck itself, how much shock a trailer without a suspension hitch actually transfers into the truck. And you guys saw it was pretty extreme, the difference between a non-shock absorption hitch and a hitch that had shock absorption characteristics built into it. I tested like 4 or 5 hitches, and the answers were clear. It was definitive. The amount of shock is reduced with any type of shock absorption hitch. And the second set of tests I performed was with the shock sensor actually mounted to the front A-frame section of the trailer. And again, the shock was severely reduced by using a shock absorption style hitch. Now, I've told people in the past, I wasn't a big fan of the shocker hitch, I wasn't a big fan of the Gen Y Boss, and I wasn't a big fan of some of these other hitches, mainly because they tend to be really big, bulky, and awkward. But after seeing the results, I can be honest, and it's very clear that the amount of shock is being reduced both to the tow vehicle and to the trailer when you use a shock absorption hitch. Now, from a practical, common sense perspective, even with a general understanding of engineering, I think it's clear to most people that if you reduce the amount of shock, the amount of energy that's being transferred from this section of the truck via firm suspension or soft suspension, it's going to improve the longevity of the components of the trailer. It's going to improve the life of the A-frame. It's going to reduce the amount of sudden shock loads that are being subjected to the front A-frame drawbar section of the RV. I don't understand why that's not more common sense to some folks, and why some folks have to be argumentative about it. I was clearly saying that RV manufacturers are using lighter weight material, thinner gauge steel, and if you think about that, I'm clearly saying that if you are going to have a trailer like that, which is going to be the vast majority of travel trailers on the road, as much as people might say, go out and buy this brand or that brand, and go with one that has a custom frame, 99.9% of people don't have those. They have what's at their local RV dealership. And I'm trying to help those folks understand that if you have a really small trailer behind a very stiff rear suspension truck, that having a shock absorption hitch, that was the whole point, a shock absorption hitch could absolutely benefit the longevity of the trailer. And probably even give you a smoother ride inside. But more importantly, probably reduce the chance that the A-frame on the trailer could fail from all of that shock and energy being transferred to it. Anyways, guys, I just wanted to make this quick clarification video because I think sometimes people, they watch part of a video, they start commenting, and then they shut the video off before they actually get to the part where I say, the whole point of this isn't to say you can't have a big dually pickup truck and a tiny trailer. You can't have a big chassis cab truck and a tiny trailer. You can't have a big 1-ton truck and a tiny trailer. The point was, if you have a heavy-duty truck, it would probably benefit you to have some type of shock absorption hitch setup. A lot of heavier duty trucks actually don't need weight distribution whenever you're towing a smaller, super lightweight trailer, 5,000, 6,000 pounds and below. You're not going to put enough weight transfer to the truck for it to even need that type of a hitch setup. And if that is the case, you leave yourself open to the option of having suspension hitches that again can reduce that shock load. And yes, manufacturers do make weight distribution setups for suspension hitches as well. You just have to again understand the principles at play and if you actually need weight distribution or not, because in many cases you don't, in many cases you do. Understand what you're towing with, the type of energy that's being transferred, and what different upgrades can do to help perhaps mitigate and reduce the chance that you have a component failure when you're towing your RV. That's the entire point. Anyways, guys, sure hope you enjoyed the video. If you haven't had a chance, please take a moment, subscribe to the channel, give me a thumbs up, and we'll talk again real soon.